He suddenly came into existence one day. This existence wondered what was the best word that could describe it. One day he was a fish swimming in a nearby lake or a bird flying high in the sky, and on other days he was an ant crawling on the ground. From spring straight until winter. That is how it has lived and died multiple times as many different organisms. Once again, he was caught and killed by the same species as before. It has millions of years worth of memories, and the only beings that it was hostile towards were humans. It was fine with being killed and devoured by other organisms since it was the natural law of nature. However, humans were the only beings that killed for enjoyment. As its life was now fading away, it kept wondering what organism it would be reborn as again and why it had the ability to reborn. As its life came to an end, the process of being reborn started. The more it felt while being reborn, the higher the chance of it being at the top of the food chain in its next life. As it slowly opened its eyes, it could instantly tell what kind of organism it was reborn as just by seeing the face that was tenderly looking at it. The only being that it was hostile towards throughout its entire lifetime was humans. Jain, hearing his name being called, was something new for him since it was the first that he had a name. Jain thought that the lives of humans were weird. They were all alive, yet they drew strong distinctions between countries and races. They named everything in the world and gave it meaning. Jain's mother had taken him to the doctor to find out why he couldn't talk, but the doctor simply told her that he was only 6 and that she should give him some more time to grow up. She then told the doctor that it wasn't even the real issue since Jain doesn't show any response whenever she tries to interact with him. The doctor then thought that the problem might be something psychological and recommended she take him to a psychiatrist. Jain's mother had no plans on taking her son to a hospital for psychos. The name of Jain's mother was Yungshil. To Jain, she was very stupid and ignorant. She had lost her parents to a war and then lost her husband to another war not long after. To her, the world was very harsh, and at one point she really wanted to give up on everything, but she couldn't do that when she had Jain to take care of. She worked hard day after day to take care of Ja. As both Jain and Yunshil had arrived home and were in bed, Yungshil told Jain the same things that she had told him every night, even though she had never received a response, which was that she loved him. Jain couldn't understand what she said and why she kept saying it, but the warm feeling that he felt didn't dislike it. For Jain, this life differed from all of his other lives, and there was one reason why that was the case. It was dark outside, and everyone should have been in their homes at that time getting ready to go to sleep. However, for one man who was currently running for his life, being safe at home was his only wish in that moment. As he ended up falling to the ground and being caught by his pursuers, he thought that his end had finally come. In that exact moment, they all noticed Jain, who was standing on a pole high above ground. The one of the men told Jain to come down since it was dangerous for a kid to be so high up. Ja thought that this was the best opportunity for him to test it out. Jain suddenly used the abilities of a frog to land safely on the ground, which surprised everyone since that was not possible for a child. Jain then used the fast speed of a cheetah to close the distance between him and the men that he was after. One of the men had taken out their gun after witnessing what was happening, but he didn't get the chance to do anything after he was hit by Jain and while he was using the strength of a dinosaur. After using his abilities, Jain was sure that it was an ability that he didn't have before. He could use the abilities of all the previous organisms that he was before. He wondered why it was possible for him, but he had no idea. One thing was clear to him though, and that was that this life was the end of his long journey. This was his last life, as the other men were still in shock after what they had just witnessed. Jain turned around with a smile on his face, as now he could finally truly die. After witnessing what had happened, one of the other guys decided to take the initiative and attack Jinha head-on, which he ended up landing the blow. The man had hoped that one hit would have ended the fight, but surprisingly, Jinha simply stood back up after stating that it hurt. Jinha had come to the conclusion that if he didn't manifest his powers, then he was just like any normal human. The man then decided to go for another attack, but this time it didn't go through, and he ended up breaking his own arm after Jain had manifested the abilities of a turtle. Jain had grabbed the man by the neck, and after confirming that he could become anything he wanted once he manifested his powers, he was about to go ahead and kill the man. However, right before he could kill him, he was suddenly shot by the man who was being chased before. After Jain acknowledged that he had made a mistake, he ended up fainting. A few hours had passed since Jain was injured, and he had finally woken up. He did not know what the weapon was called that injured him, but he knew for a fact that he was in a lot of pain since the bullet had pierced his internal organs. Jain lay on the ground and wondered if he was going to die again, but due to his survival instincts, he had activated his ability and was able to heal himself. He had thought that there was nothing left for him to experience in life, but that seems to be a lie. He then wondered how such a small body could possess so much power. Standing out in the fields, Jain could hear his mother desperately looking for him and calling his name to the point where she was disturbing all of the surrounding neighbors. After catching a random bird flying around in the fields, Jain thought that even though he was still a child, he could hunt for himself and, as such, did not need his mother anymore. Jain hesitated for a moment after remembering the countless nights that he had slept with his mother and the feeling he felt every time she had told him that she loved him, but he decided to leave in the end. For 4 days straight, Jain was walking around out in the sun without eating or drinking anything, and finally he had collapsed from exhaustion. As Jain lay on the ground, he wondered what the problem was and why he was suffering so much. Jain had lived countless lives, but this was the first time that he had felt such a feeling. He felt death nearing closer, which he welcomed since he didn't have any regrets at all. He did not end up reaching death's door since his mother had suddenly shown up not looking much better than he did. Youngshil was so happy to have finally found her son to the point where she burst into tears. Jinha had thought that he was going to die, but after his mother had embraced him in her arms, all of his worries started fading away. The only thought that he had was that he was hungry and he wanted food that was made by his mother. Jinha decided to speak for the first time since he was born in order to make his mother stop crying. Jinha had told his mother the one thing that she kept telling him every night before bed, "I love you," which totally caught his mother by surprise. He had intended to stop crying, but what he said had made him cry even more. His mother held him in her arms while he gently watched the sunset in the distance that he thought was beautiful for some reason. Jain then thought that there was nothing wrong with him staying with his mother for a bit longer until he became independent. The man who was being chased at night and had shot Jinha was in a room being questioned about what had taken place that night. The man then stated everything that had happened. He also stated that he had killed Jain, but when asked where the body was, he couldn't say anything since Jahin's body was not at the scene where he had killed him. He tried to defend himself, but the detective wasn't going to believe him at all. He then turned to the other detective who was there with him and saw when he had killed Jain, but the detective pretended that nothing that he had stated happened. Since no one believed what he was saying, he ended up being taken away in the end. After Jain had run away before, his mother always held his hands, thinking that he would get lost again if she didn't watch him closely. Every time his mother smiled at him, Jain felt a warm feeling, which he didn't dislike at all. He didn't hate what Youngshil was doing for him, which could turn out to be very dangerous for him. Jain had ended up getting into a fight at school, and so his mother was called in. After hearing that Jain had gotten hit, she couldn't keep calm at all, and so the teacher tried to intervene in the conversation, but even he couldn't calm her down. Jain then took notice that his mother was very nice, but she was only nice to him. When the old ladies in the village would gossip about Jain not being able to talk and is always spacing out, Youngshil would immediately go over and interrupt them. Even when she was at the local market and someone wanted her to move, she would argue with them until they had no choice but to leave her alone. Time had passed just like that, and Jain had gotten used to a human's body and living like one in everyday life. Youngshil had taken a flower and put it in her and asked Jain what he thought, but again, she didn't receive a response. She told Jain that it was lunchtime and then took his hand to leave. While they were walking, Jain asked her why she was fighting against the whole world, and she simply told him that everything she did was all so that she could protect him. Jain had come to the realization that the one thing he didn't want to happen had ended up happening, and as a result, he had gotten attached and didn't want to leave Yangshil. He really wanted to spend more time with his mother, but their time together was soon coming to an end as he had been found by one of the detectives. Survival of the fittest, where the weak becomes prey for the strong. It was a law that applied to every single being in the world. However, there were some deaths that just could not be understood. It was now 12 years since Jain was reborn, and he had now gotten used to living in human society. A lot had changed over those 12 years in the sense that buildings where he lived had gotten much taller and they now had straighter roads, and even factories had begun appearing, which caused his mother to become sick. Food that he instinctively did not like and had decided not to eat because it had been polluted ended up being eaten by Yunshil, which was why she had become sick. After coming home and taking care of his mother, he decided that it was time for him to go to school and then got up and left. Instead of going to school like he said he would, Jain had gone to the local market to sell some apples. While he was there, he wondered why humans had to destroy everything for their own comfort and wondered why his mother had to be the one in pain. The detective then came over and decided to buy one of his apples since they looked good. The detective then took a bite out of one of the apples and told him that it was good while looking him directly in the eye. The detective then stated that he had planned on visiting him earlier, but he wanted to see how a monster grew up. He then asked Jinha why he was pretending to be human, but Jinhan didn't respond to him at all. They then decided to handcuff him and take him back with them, and to their surprise, Jinhan didn't resist at all. The detective then asked him if he was okay being taken so easily. He also told him that he was being investigated for espionage and that if he was a spy, then his mother would be too, and that he had already sent someone to get her. After hearing what the detective said, Jinhan activated his ability in front of everyone who was present at the market. He then left and headed towards where his mother was. The detective who called him a monster had severely underestimated Jinhan, and so that day he became a living disaster. The reason why humans were considered the center of the world's dispute over their weak constitution was because of language. Their sophisticated way of communicating allowed them to form groups and develop faster than any other species. Jinhan kept running nonstop towards where his mother was. Even when he was tired, he didn't stop to take a break and just kept pushing forward using his abilities. Back at the local market, two other detectives that saw what happened at the market sat down together and were talking about what they had seen. They were surprised that a 12-year-old boy could be a spy and thought that it was unnecessary for the captain to mobilize so many people just to capture him. The officers that were sent to get Jinhan's mother had arrived at their house and planned on dragging her out. Before they could enter the house, though, Jinhan landed right behind them, panting after running such a long distance for so long. The officers wondered where he suddenly appeared from and asked him if he was the one who lived there. After Jinhan had responded to their question, they also thought that the captain might have made a mistake but decided to take him in anyway. Jinhan was about to attack them, but his mother opened the door and asked what was going on. Even though they saw that Jinhan's mother was sick, they had to take both of them in since they had to follow orders. After seeing that they were trying to take her son, Young Shil got up and started yelling that they were being kidnapped in order to draw everyone's attention. The men wondered how she had that much strength to yell so loudly and thought that she must be a spy. One of the men then decided to slap Young Shil in order to keep her quiet. However, Jinhan, who had witnessed it, was not going to just let it slide. In that moment, Jinhan decided to abandon his sanity and just go all out. In the blink of an eye, Jinhan had killed all of the men that had come to capture them, with his mother witnessing everything that had happened. Yunshil then called out to Jinhan, who was covered with blood. He then turned around to his mother's sad face as she cried for him. The captain then showed up in an armored vehicle with more men to capture Jinhan. After seeing the bodies surrounding Jinhan, The captain was finally able to prove his point that Jinhan was indeed a monster and told them not to go easy on him if they didn't want to get killed. Jinhan planned on just killing everyone that was there, but Yushil rushed in front of him and started shouting at the men that she was the one who had killed everyone and that Jinhan didn't do anything wrong. Yushil, who barely had any energy to eat, was running around like crazy, which reminded Jinhan of what his mother had told him when he asked her why she was always fighting. For the first time since he had been reborn as a human, Jinhan was crying. The captain stood there for a second and then took out his gun. He planned on killing her with one shot, but decided to shoot her in the leg first. Jinhan wasn't going to let his mother get hurt, and so he blocked the bullet. The captain started laughing after figuring out Jinhan's weakness and then told everyone that they should aim for Yushil instead of shooting at Jinhan directly. One of his men then told him that since they were not resisting capture, there was no need to use violence. The captain wasn't just going to easily capture them and pretend like nothing had happened. He told all of them if they didn't want to end up like the other dead officers lying around, then they better follow his orders. The captain then gave the order for them to shoot, and all of them fired their guns without hesitation. Jinhan was determined to protect Yushil, and so he had activated his abilities to the extreme in order to block the bullets that were coming at them. Jinhan used the ability of an armadillo and blocked all of the bullets that were coming at them all while protecting Yushil, who was surprised by what was happening before her. After they had stopped firing, Jinhan was still standing before them, which shocked even the captain. He then told everyone to keep shooting. Jinhan was ready to use his abilities one more time to protect Yushil, but she suddenly came in front of him and blocked all of the bullets that were aimed at them after whispering to Jinhan that it was okay. She then fell to the ground and tried to tell Jinhan one more time what she had always told him every night, but no words were coming out of her mouth. Using his abilities, Jinhan was able to talk with his mother one last time. He was crying so much, even though he didn't cry at all when he was born. He then told Yushil that he didn't know what to do and that he was sorry for everything. Yushil then told him that he didn't need to apologize, as his being born as her son was the greatest gift. Yushil had ended up passing away in the end, and now it doesn't matter what Jinhan had to do or who he had to kill, he was going to fulfill his mother's last dying wish, which was for him to stay alive no matter what. You might be wondering why the captain was so obsessed with Jain. There were a lot of reasons why, but the main reason was because of pride. Humans take pride in being able to understand the things around them and fear the things they don't understand, which was why he tried to end things. Yushil's words still echoed in Jinhan's mind, telling him to stay alive no matter what. As he stood there for a while, he thought to himself that there was no way for him to coexist with humans. He might end up hurting another human again, somewhere along the line in life. Jinhan had finally come to the conclusion that no matter what, he was going to fulfill his mother's last wish, no matter what, and stay alive. He then turned his back and started running away. He gave the captain one last look before leaving. The captain then told everyone to chase after him since he was getting away. The captain then told everyone to get in the vehicle and that this was their chance to get him since he was now weak. The sun was now setting on the horizon, and the captain still kept the chase going, not giving Jinhan a chance to rest at all. They chased him through the garden that was full of memories of him and his mother. Jinhan decided that he had enough of running and stopped. The captain and everyone then got out of the vehicle, wondering why he had When he suddenly stops, the chief demands to know why he isn't running anymore. Jain explains that he chose this place carefully. He wanted to protect his mother and avoid causing more harm, showing a depth of emotional control that surprises his pursuers. With a mix of sadness and determination, he apologizes to those he killed before. He speaks to the pursuing team about something deeper than their mission. He reminds them that everyone has a mother, someone who loves them unconditionally. When the team mockingly laughs at his mature way of speaking, he challenges them about how humans destroy nature, kill animals, and disrupt entire ecosystems without a second thought. In this moment, Jain experiences a profound realization. he suddenly understands the purpose of his special powers. It becomes clear to him that he was born with a specific mission to remove humans from the world. This understanding transforms him from a vulnerable victim to a powerful force of nature. Without warning, he unleashes his incredible abilities. The ground breaks beneath his feet, and he rises into the sky, destroying everything around him. His power is absolute and terrifying. The landscape changes, buildings crumble, and his pursuers realize they are completely outmatched. The chief, badly injured and barely alive, still clings to his beliefs. He insists that monsters like Jain cannot coexist with humans. With his last breath, he warns that all humans will witness his anger and destruction. But Jain is beyond such threats now. Under the bright moonlight, he carries his mother's body. His walk is steady and filled with a mix of grief and determination. He moves without stopping, hearing her voice in his mind. The memories of her love surround him like a protective shield. In a deeply emotional moment, he finally tells her what he could never say before, that he loves her too. Jain walks alone, reflecting on his life. Though he has lived for millions of years, the time with his mother feels like a precious instant. He thinks about the endless love and affection she gave him, making these few years more meaningful than all his previous existence. The pain hits him again as he realizes she's gone, and it's because of him. In all his long life, no death has ever hurt him this deeply. His mother's last words echo in his mind to live, and he silently agrees. The scene shifts to winter. A hunter is shooting pheasants when he spots Jain standing in the cold, wearing only short sleeves. Surprised and concerned, the hunter questions why a child would be in such a dangerous hunting area alone. When he asks about Jain's parents, Jain simply states they are dead. The hunter shows the pheasant he shot, but instead of being impressed, Jain questions if he's proud of killing birds. Something in the boy's response unsettles the hunter. Showing kindness, the hunter gives Jain his coat and invites him to his home. Outside their house, the hunter's wife waits, and they welcome Jain inside. They ask him to take a bath before dinner, planning to serve the soft pheasant meat they've prepared. However, Jain shows no interest in the food. During their time together, they hear construction sounds from the nearby mountain. Jain asks about this, curious about what they're building. When they ask how he reached these remote mountains, he simply says he walked there. The hunter expresses concern about a child living alone in such a place. The hunter makes plans for Jain's future. He suggests going to the village the next day to speak with the town chief about finding someone to care for Jain. He mentions that Jain needs proper schooling, patting his head while jokingly saying the boy will learn to speak respectfully to adults. As night falls, Jain lies awake while the couple sleeps. His attention turns to the photos hanging on the walls, and what he discovers changes everything. The photos reveal a shocking truth: the hunter was once the head of the organization that controlled the chief who ordered his mother's death. The woman in the house is the chief's mother. This discovery adds a layer of irony to the situation. The very people showing him kindness are connected to those who caused his greatest pain. The hunter, who worried about Jain's well-being, was once part of the system that destroyed his life. The woman who welcomed him into her home is the mother of the man who took his mother away. The next morning, the man lends Jain some slightly oversized clothes and takes him along. Before leaving, he says goodbye to his mother. When he asks why his mother rarely speaks, the man scolds Jain for being disrespectful to elders. He explains that his mother can't hear or speak well. He questions why he still talks to her, and the man responds that even though she can't hear, she understands his intentions. Suddenly, heavy rain begins. The man tells him to find shelter to avoid getting sick. At that moment, at a construction site nearby, things start falling, including a tree. The man is severely injured, with blood coming from his head and nose, and is covered in mud. The protagonist runs to help him. With his last breath, the man asks to be taken to his mother. Looking up at the Rosito construction site, he glimpses his own mother, revealing that he was behind this incident. Jain, and takes the man's body to his grieving mother, then flies away with it. The next morning, while sitting alone, he reflects on his mother's death and questions whether his anger towards humans is justified. He remembers his mother's words about trying things even without knowing the outcome. The scene shifts to Jain Resort's opening ceremony. When the protagonist appears, security tries to remove him. One guard approaches him, but it's revealed that he has already killed all the guards and staff members on his way in. Terrified, the remaining man watches as the protagonist declares he won't hesitate anymore, following his mother's advice that if you don't know, just do what he announces, that he will kill them all simply because he wants to. Jain stood on a hall wall, looking down. He was constantly improving and understanding the world around him, although it wasn't easy for him at all. However, he could definitely do it, he thought to himself, with a lot of dead bodies behind. Jain was now standing in front of the man's grave, but when it should have been one grave, it ended up being two. It might have been due to the shock of her son dying, but the man's mother had also ended up passing away not long after. Jain then decided to sit down and actually think about what powers he has. Right now, Jain could call on the powers of any living thing, and so he could become anything. But the problem was that if he was not actively focusing on or using his powers, then his body would return to that of a normal human. Jain thought that he couldn't do anything if he was like that. 1 year had passed, and Jain could be found standing in front of an oncoming train. The train was coming at him so fast, and he ended up being hit in the end. Jain fell to the ground hard. The train operator was shocked after what had happened, but he was more shocked by the fact that Jain was able to just get up and walk away like nothing happened. The reason why Jain decided to get hit by the train was to test his powers and to see how well he had mastered them. After another year had passed, Jain mastered his powers to the point where he was now able to communicate with all living beings. He was able to communicate with them through telepathy rather than speaking. He was able to easily accomplish this due to his diligence, but mostly because of his human nature, since most living beings on Earth tend to like humans. Another 5 years had passed, and Jain had finally reached adulthood. He thought that it would be more beneficial for him to maintain his current body state, and so he did by using the ability of a turtle. Like that, 10 more years had passed. His communication skills had grown to the point where he could communicate with more than just living things, but with the dirt, water, and plants that were around him. After mastering his powers to such a point, he could finally feel it. The Earth was suffering. Jain had spent 30 years training his abilities. There was no limit to what he could do, and he also discovered that he could combine his abilities as well, which meant that his preparation was finally complete, and he was now ready to go against humanity. Jain thought to himself if he should really eradicate humanity and wondered if it was okay to do it at that exact moment. Jain had planned on applying heat and pressure to the Earth's crust, which would then end up causing an earthquake to happen. A strong earthquake that would shake the entire planet, resulting in a lot of deaths. With his current power, there were 6 places across the Earth where he could cause the same magnitude earthquake to happen. Everyone would end up being consumed by the ocean, or getting buried under the Earth. The total extinction of all of humanity is what would happen. It's very simple, but Jain knew that humans wouldn't be the only ones to die, but he still planned on doing it. He wanted to do it, but when it came down to it, he was hesitating. He had been alone for so many years and thought that he should see what humans are like now before he destroys them. Jain thought there was nothing wrong with seeing what they were like now, since he could destroy them easily at any time. As Jain was wondering about it, he thought to himself that there was nowhere he could go where the influence of humans hadn't spread. Even the road that he was now walking on was once a field filled with flowers. Jain was now tired and thought that he should just kill them all now, but in that moment a car came driving down the highway. Jain stood there for a moment until he decided to use his powers to make the car stop, but in that moment he took notice of the driver, who looked a lot like his mother. As the rocks were coming down to crush the car, Jain moved forward and completely destroyed the boulder. He then decided to get a closer look at the driver, but he ended up scaring the driver instead. Another rock then fell from above and hit Jain on his head, knocking him out. Jain wondered why it hurt so much, and thought that it shouldn't be possible since he was always manifesting his powers subconsciously. He then knew instantly why he was not able to manifest his powers and had stopped thinking entirely, which was because the lady that had rushed out of the car to his aid looked exactly like his mother. Jain thought that it had been a while since he had felt the feeling of death, but he didn't die at all and instead woke up in a hospital. Jain suddenly got up but was told by the nurse that he should still be careful. Then the nurse asked Jain for his name since they didn't have any information on him, but Jain looked so puzzled. He then stated that he couldn't remember what his name was. He then suddenly remembered and told them that his name was Jain. Even after providing his name to the nurse, they were still unable to locate any information for him. Jain had ended up losing his memory, which the doctor thought was quite unfortunate. 3 months had passed, and there was still no information available about Jain's identity. There was no registered information for him at all. The officers then told the lady that if Jain had a guardian, then things would be a lot easier. She thought to herself for a while, and in the end she decided to become his guardian. She then went forward to the receptionist to fill out Jain's discharge form. After Jain had been discharged, he turned to her and asked if something was wrong since she didn't look okay. She then told Jain that what had happened was an accident and that she doesn't plan on being indebted to him. Jain didn't understand what she was saying to him at all. She then told him that she went ahead and registered his age and proceeded to tell him that she was 34, which is way older than he was. She then told Jain that he could stay at the dorm that she was living at until he regains his memories. Jain then held her hand as they were leaving. However, she quickly brushed his hand aside and reminded him not to hold her hand. She told him that if he wanted to hold her hand, he should ask first, and after he asked her, she held his hand, and they both left together. A memory suddenly came back to Jain, which was a memory of him and his mother when she was alive. Lisu then introduced Jain to her friend and told her that he was going to live with her, which was surprising. Her friend then told her that it would be weird for both of them to live together. Lisu then told her that she felt somewhat responsible for what happened to Jain and that there shouldn't be a problem with them living together since he was harmless. Her friend then provided Lisu with another option, which was for Jain to stay in the empty room that was at the top of the cafe. Jain wanted to stay with Lisu, however, she told him that she didn't want him to stay with her. She then told him that he could work at the cafe since he would be paid. She then decided that it was time for her to leave and told Jain that she would visit him often. They then went outside, where Lisu then saw Royce, who was her friend's dog. She was surprised that Royce actually went up to someone who wasn't her for the first time. Jain was petting Royce when his ability activated, and he then took notice of another living organism that was unknown to even him, contained in a truck that was passing by. Jain could feel the hostility that the creature had towards the human race, which frightened even him. Hydra is a cnidarian that can regenerate its body even if only 1 out of 200 parts survived. It was currently being researched for medical purposes when they discovered another type of cnidaria, and both were now being studied to find out what the difference between them was. The newly discovered type of cnidaria was called steer. The reason behind the Earth's perfection was balance. All different creatures on Earth were born with their own set of instincts. Jain asked Lisu where she was going, to which she told him that she was going to church. Even though Jain was working, he really wanted to go with Lisu. Lisu then asked Jain if he was a part of any religion before the accident and asked him if he remembered. Jain didn't know what they meant by religion, to which Lisu then asked him if he believed that a god existed. Jain then told her that there was definitely God since the Earth was too perfect. Even though he had forgotten years of memories, he could still feel that Earth was too perfect, and that the one who created it wouldn't let anything disrupt the balance. You could even go so far as to say that if there was ever a chance that the balance would be disrupted, something else would be put in place to keep things flowing in order. such as creating a being to maintain that balance. A being that was born with the sole purpose of survival and whose survival instinct was to drive humans to extinction. There were currently two beings on Earth with the same purpose. One was trapped, and the other who can't remember himself. Jain was staying in the empty room on the top floor of the cafe, and Lisa's friend didn't pay much attention to him since she thought he would be able to take care of himself. However, Jain's room needed to be cleaned, but instead of cleaning it, he just left it as is. Lisa's friend was asking him why he didn't clean his room, but Jain just kept staring at her. She then started giving him orders in order to get his room cleaned up. Jain then stated that there were a lot of books, to which she told him the reason why there were so many books was because the cafe used to be a book cafe, and that he could read the books if he got bored. Jain and Lisa's friend then went down to the cafe, where she started teaching Jain how to work at the cafe and serve customers. He then got to work, and then his first set of customers came in, and Jain did exactly as he was told and smiled, which surprised them. Lisa was heading towards the cafe after completing her evening run, where she saw a lot of customers in Jain who was busy at work. The day had ended, and the cafe had finally closed. Lisa's friend was happy since she had made a lot of profit because of Jain, who brought in many customers. She then asked Lisa why she was there, to which Lisa told her that she was just there to check up on how Jain was doing. Lisa then asked her if she wanted to drink, but she declined her offer after stating that she had a date to attend. Jain then offered to drink with her since he didn't have anything planned. Lisa decided that it was okay to have a drink with him and asked what his preference was. Jain told her that he hadn't tried any alcohol before, and so Lisa went ahead and made a special drink for him. After drinking the beer, Jain thought that it was very bitter and asked Lisa why people drink beer. She told him that it was to get drunk and that the world they lived in was cruel, so in order to survive, you have to be cruel as well, but she wasn't that type of person at all. Jain then asked her what happens when people get drunk, to which she told him that they get softer and reveal their true selves. They both ended up getting drunk, and while they were on their way home, Jain told her that what she had told him was a lie since the world was now squiggly to him. Lisa was about to go home, to which Jain offered to walk her home since she was drunk and it was dangerous at night. While Jain was walking her home, Lisa took notice of a group of fireflies and decided to stop for a moment to take a look. Jain then asked her if she liked them, to which she said yes. Jain then used his powers and started glowing after using the firefly's ability and asked Lisa if she liked him too now that he was also glowing, but he ended up scaring her.